Is Planetside 2 dying? Maybe a filthy clickbait title, but it came to my attention that Zoran the Bear's video with the same title, almost 2 years old now, is one of the first things you see when you search Planetside 2. It isn't only outdated, but it has quite a negative view of Planetside 2. The only effect I can see this having is adding fuel to the fire and turning away potential planetmans. No hard feelings for Zoran at all, he is a nice chap, but I just wanted to tackle the issue again now. So, in my frustration, I thought, well, let's give the topic another go, objectively, looking at statistics and current affairs. To set the scene, it is no lie that Planetside 2 is an aging game. It has had 3 years of service now, and a lot shinier games have come out in the meantime. Although, since Battlefield 4, the more comparable genre of warfare games have fallen by the wayside, with Hardline and Battlefront not being stellar hits. Statistics-wise, if we are to look at population charts, on first appearances from March 2014 to January 2016, PC populations at prime time have dipped from around 9,000 to 4,000, over half of what it was 2 years ago. This is an inescapable truth and in line with the realism that new shiny games are constantly tugging on players' heartstrings. However, what needs to be considered is that half of the servers have been merged, Briggs, the Australian server, being the exception. Now there's 5 servers rather than 9. Comparing what my server Woodman was like in the past couple of years before it was merged with Miller, there were a lot of times when it felt quite barren. The only time populations peaked was when SOE rotated the recommended servers and you got an influx of new players to farm for XP. Now it feels quite a lot more populated than it was most of the time in the past. In prime time, a continent is usually full and you have to queue to get in. I'd say to any prospective players that the massive battles this game is loved for definitely have not vanished. Often, even in out-of-hours play, you will get at least one 48 versus 48 battle, where in real terms you have about 100 players, more than any other traditional shooters. One thing I need to mention about these statistics is that there are a few inconsistencies. For example, Steam tracks 4,100 average peak players, and the stat site tracks just under 4,000 an average prime time in January 2016. This is odd because you can use a launcher outside of Steam, which a lot of people do, so you would assume the figure would be higher rather than lower on the stat site. You also have to consider that peak does not mean that player counts totally drop, as there is an EU and US peak time, and Australian as well, so the drop occurs when both of these are out of peak. Also, the population isn't necessarily shared between all servers, as there are times when the 2 EU servers have a larger share, and then the US servers take over into the EU morning. This also doesn't take into account the PS4 population numbers, which on a single server reached 2,400 peak players on January the 23rd this year. On the same day, the combined PC and PS4 population was over 8,000, around that 2014 figure. But really that isn't fair, as they ought to be treated separately, as players can't move between the two versions. There are quite a few things that really hurt Planetside 2's player retention on PC. First of all, the game takes quite a powerful machine to run properly, and the game skews towards needing a strong CPU as there are so many characters on screen at one time. Also, the optimization leaves a lot to be desired with varied performances. Sometimes though, it literally is something brought up by a new patch, as we saw this month, which is hopefully fixed for most people. And I am back to my usual FPS, which jumps into the 100s and drops to the high 40s and 50s when in massive fights. But regarding that, I don't sacrifice my graphic fidelity. Another thing is player progression and the myth of pay to win. I think new players are often open to a very one-sided state of play. A Batarang 100 plus is most likely going to wail on any Batarang 1 to 20s. They know the terrain, how to control their recoil, and every other little advantage in the game. And whilst this is enough to annoy a lot of potential players, it also can give rise to claims of pay to win, when realistically most things in the game are side grades, and the certs that you want to put into your abilities are the things that players often miss. Stagnant fights also are off-putting to new players. Getting stuck at a base being spawn camped by 70% of enemy players is no fun at all. The between base epic rushes and dynamic defences are the visual pornography that sells this game. Thankfully, Xander Claus, the map designer, is on a warpath to remove smaller bases and allow for the more epic tank clashes we like to see. This brings me on to the hope and faith in the developers. Previously, and as Zoran said in 2014, things had really stagnated, development was bitty and targets were missed. Further into 2015, SOE came to an end and layoffs really shook faith in the game. But going into 2016, team members have been rehired, patch targets are now being hit, and we are getting quite a lot of new content in each patch. I think just the aura of development needs to be gotten across to potential players and the positive content progression we are now getting. Leading on from this, Planetside 2 has always been pretty rubbish when getting the word out and marketing the game. Rel recently came up with an idea that the game needs to be relaunched in 2016 and the hype rebuilt again, to once again stand in the spotlight. I roughly agree, and well, he's now on the development team, so perhaps will even have some sway. All in all, whilst Planetside 2's shooting mechanics aren't as tight as Battlefield's, the graphics are starting to date a little, and the game does everything well, like tanking, flying, infantry mechanics, but not great. But the reason we are all here is because this game is a one of a kind. No other game comes as close to a real Battlefield, and everything else feels barren in comparison. And that is still the case, as there isn't an alternative. My opinion is that Planetside 2 fulfills my desire to play a war game, and nothing can fit that slot elsewhere yet. I complement it with games like Dota, Gigantic, Armored Warfare and others, which means I don't get burnt out. Ironically, I think the players that are most bitter often originally loved the game, but played it so much that the flaws became much more visible and the gameplay almost became another part of their lives. Burnout is very real, guys. I think the only sad thing is that because of the rocky success of the game, we probably won't see a Planetside 3, and that truly is the biggest travesty. To conclude, in no way is Planetside 2 dead yet, and sorry for the title. Realistically, it is an aging game that has lost quite a few of its PC players as it went out of the limelight. Planetside 2 marketing and player retention does need a lot of work, but the development and team composition give me a bit more hope that these will be addressed. But there is currently no alternative to the experience, and until anything comes out to fill the gap, which I doubt, I don't think it will die in the near future. Thanks for watching, everybody. What are all your thoughts? Be sure to comment below, like if you enjoyed it, dislike if you didn't, and subscribe for more. Until next time, everybody, Joshino.